My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 72 years old, a retired postmaster from Vermont. And for most of my life, Christmas meant warmth, noise, family, and the smell of cinnamon rolls my wife used to make before she passed away 5 winters ago. And even though life quieted down after her death, I still believed my kids, Mark, Susan, and Daniel, would never forget that old traditions mattered, that the holidays were meant for staying close, for showing love, not disappearing like distant radio signals. But this year everything felt different from the start. First came the excuses. Mark said he had plans with his wife's family. Susan claimed her kids had holiday programs she couldn't skip. And Daniel didn't even call, he just sent a 3-word text. Can't make it. And I tried telling myself they were busy, that they had their own lives. But when Christmas Eve arrived and the house stayed silent, no phone calls, no visits, not even a message, I felt something inside me sink in a way I hadn't felt since the day I buried my wife. A kind of loneliness that sits on your chest like a heavy winter blanket. I made myself a small dinner, turned on the old radio, and sat in the armchair I've repaired 4 times because it's the only one that still smells like her perfume. And I kept checking the driveway, hoping maybe one of them would surprise me, maybe a car would pull in. Maybe someone would remember the man who raised them, worked overtime to buy their gifts, fought through storms to make their Christmas mornings magical. But the driveway stayed empty, the house stayed cold, and the clock kept ticking toward midnight. Each second like a reminder that I had become an afterthought in the very family I'd built. I went to bed early, more out of sadness than sleepiness, telling myself I'd get through it. That old men like me weren't supposed to expect much anyway. But on Christmas morning, when sunlight crept through the blinds and I opened my eyes to complete silence, something truly broke. Because Christmas morning was supposed to be loud kids running through hallways, wrapping paper everywhere, fire crackling, coffee brewing. But instead, I walked into the kitchen and found nothing but an empty table and a cold cup of yesterday's tea. I sat there, staring at the quiet, wondering when I had stopped being part of their world, wondering whether I had failed as a father or simply been replaced by convenience and busyness. And around noon, when I was ready to give up and pretend the day didn't exist at all, there came a knock at the door, a knock so unexpected I actually froze, thinking maybe I imagined it, because who could possibly be visiting an old man on Christmas? But the knock came again, louder this time. And when I pulled open the door, I nearly stopped breathing. Because standing on my porch wearing a snow-covered coat, holding a box and smiling nervously, was my old neighbor's grandson, Ethan, the kid who used to mow my lawn in the summers. The kid I hadn't seen in 15 years, now a grown man in his late 20s with the same crooked smile he had as a boy. "Mr. Bennett?" he said, brushing snow from his hair. I hope I'm not intruding, and I felt my throat tighten because in that moment, someone remembered me, not my own children, but a kid I once paid $10 and a sandwich to mow the grass. He explained that he had driven up from Boston to visit his grandmother's old house, felt nostalgic, and suddenly remembered me and the way I always invited him inside for hot cocoa after he finished mowing. And something inside him told him to check on me, to see if I was still here, and yes, a stranger's grandson remembered me more than my own family. He handed me the box he was holding, and inside was a small Christmas cake, homemade, with uneven frosting like someone tried twice to make it look right, and he said, "I made it myself. I'm not very good at baking, but I figured you shouldn't be alone on Christmas." And the sincerity in his voice cracked something open inside me. Something I had been holding together with stubborn pride for far too long. I invited him in, expecting him to stay a few minutes, but he took off his coat, sat in the kitchen, and began talking like we hadn't lost 15 years, telling me about his job, his struggles, the way he felt lost since his dad passed, how he remembered my advice from years ago when I told him that good men don't quit when life gets heavy. And he said that line stuck with him, helped him through nights he didn't think he'd make it. We talked for hours, laughing, drinking cocoa, sharing stories. And for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel empty, it felt alive. As if someone had reopened windows that had been shut for years. Around evening he asked gently, "So, where's your family?" Are they showing up later? And for a moment I tried to brush it off, but the truth spilled out how they forgot, how they made excuses, how they left me alone. And he shook his head slowly with sadness, not pity, and said something that I will never forget, Mr. Bennett. Sometimes the people we love forget how to love us back, but that doesn't mean we stop being worth loving. I felt tears prick my eyes, the kind I hadn't let fall since my wife's funeral, and instead of turning away, I let one roll down because sometimes when someone speaks truth, it hits harder than loneliness ever did. We ended up sharing the little cake he brought. And halfway through dinner he insisted on cooking something better. He ran to the store, bought ingredients, and came back to cook pasta in my kitchen like he had been doing it his whole life, teasing me for how outdated my pots were, joking that he'd buy me new ones next Christmas. And for the first time in years, I felt what Christmas used to feel like, not because of presents, or lights, or decorations, but because someone chose to be there, chose to care, chose to show up when it mattered. When it got late and he finally stood to leave, I walked him to the door, and he looked at me with the kind of sincerity my own children hadn't shown in decades and said, "Mr. Bennett, you won't spend Christmas alone next year." I promise. And after he left, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt warm, hopeful, alive, and that night I sat in my armchair, the same one that still smelled faintly of my wife's perfume, and realized that family isn't defined by blood or last names, it's defined by presence, by kindness, by who shows up when the world forgets you. The next morning I woke to a message from Ethan, a picture of us laughing in the kitchen, followed by the words, "Merry Christmas, old friend." And as I looked at that photo, I understood something I wish I had learned earlier. Sometimes life takes people away, but sometimes it sends the right person at the right moment to remind you that you still matter, that your story isn't over, and that even when your own family forgets you, someone unexpected might knock on your door and give you the gift you didn't even know you needed, the gift of being seen.